Gail and Tom. We'll sort of crack on as soon as possible so that that we can get through the things we need to get through. Before I start, as always, any questions from anybody or anything that anybody would like to raise before we move on to the content of tonight? No? Okay, right, okay, right, let's crack on then, and we'll just watch out for anybody entering a little bit later. Give me a second. Okay. Oops, get back. Okay, right, so we're moving on now to the end of module 1. So we should finish that today and just sort of leave that behind, and then tomorrow Wednesday in practice, we will run through the assignments and have a look at that and hopefully give you some helpful hints on how to get that completed. So what we're going to do today, we're going to have a quick recap, just reminders really of what we've done over the last few weeks, a few little interactive tasks for you to do as well to confirm understanding, and then I'm going to run through the different types of inductions. Obviously, over the last few weeks, we've just practiced the very basic, really progressive muscle relaxation ones to really get you in the sort of mode of doing that and feeling comfortable with that. So we're going to look at some of the other types of inductions, not necessarily going to do them, just look at what else is available. We will touch on other types of inductions as we move on to other modules. Also going to look at different therapeutic approaches and how that is all combined into the Andrew Parr combined approach, if you like. And then we're also going to look more closely at the 2 main different types of hypnotherapy, as well as looking at contraindications for actually using hypnosis and hypnotherapy on people. So that's what we got planned for today. So just starting off with a bit of a recap. Now, obviously, over the last few weeks, first week, obviously, it was very much about sort of looking at what the course is all about, a few ground rules, that sort of thing. We looked at a few various different definitions of hypnosis, what it was, what it wasn't. And, you know, some of you are probably now starting to put together your own idea of what you would say. And one of your assignment tasks will be to actually come up with your own definition based on probably a selection of different definitions of hypnosis based on your understanding so far. We've done quite a lot of practice of inductions, and hopefully we'll have a little bit more time on that tomorrow, but we will be spending quite a bit of time on the assignments themselves to try and give you as much help as possible on that so that you can really crack on. And then we obviously looked at the pyramid model and the library model. And you've practiced explaining that to each other, so hopefully that's starting to sink in as a way of really understanding what's going on with the mind when we're working with people. We also looked at the stress response last week and the general adaptive syndrome and how that, you know, the stress response, that is kind of the result of it if it goes too far. So I'm going to get you to talk a little bit about that to begin with, really to just give you a bit of a prompt and a reminder, because that stress response is such a key part of what we're working with people on, you know, the majority of people that you're going to see. So before I go too much further, I'm going to be asking you to go back over your notes. Now, hopefully you've all got your notes in front of you on the stress response. And much like we did with the pyramid model and the library model, I'm going to very quickly put you into groups so that you can spend a few minutes, each of you, just describing your understanding of what the stress response is, what happens, and looking at that general adaptive syndrome as well, and what that means, what that might mean for a client and so on. So please remember again, it's not about getting this right or wrong. It's really just trying to get you to talk to each other about your own understanding of what that is, because it is so key in everything we do. So before we move on to anything else tonight, I'd really like to get you into groups to do that. Now, anybody that's new tonight, like Tom and Gail, please be kind to them. And we won't put you in a group together, you two. We'll put you with some other people that have already done this. hopefully some of you might have had a chance to look at that. I don't know if Gail and Tom, whether you have or not, but don't worry if you haven't. Listen to other people's explanations and contribute what you can, but please don't worry too much. Okay, so without further ado, Heather, if you could just put us into groups.
Done.
Lovely. And I will. And if you can just literally just looking at that, as I said, have your notes in front of you. So don't worry about not using those. It's really about what your understanding is about the stress response, how that might translate into what you might have sat in front of you in terms of a client at some point when you're working with issues, and looking at that, the gas syndrome as well. Okay, so we'll just go into breakout rooms now. We'll spend about 5 minutes each on this. So if we say 10, 15 minutes altogether, and then we'll come back in and we'll move on.
And I didn't put that in the recording.
I noticed you didn't put that on record when you did that.
I can't remember. My brain's still fuggy.
Yeah, to be fair, Heather's not been very well, so she's just in recovery, aren't you? It's just about coming back. Okay, so how did you all find that, explaining that? Has that made that a little bit clearer if it wasn't already clear? Mm-hmm. Let's help to just put that into context. And I mean, I personally find talking at people, you know, I know when I've revised for things in the past, talking at somebody about what I understand is a really great way to actually confirm my own understanding. So I'm hoping that works for you, but I'm aware of the fact that we all learn differently. We all have different learning styles. So I
found out from an actor that the way they learn their lines is to actually speak them aloud. There's something about saying them aloud that makes it going into the memory much better than just reading it to yourself. So explaining it is doing that as well, isn't it? Helping you remember it.
I mean, I think you could say as well, it's another reason why when we're working with clients and we get them to say out loud what they're feeling, it's very powerful. You know, it actually is like, oh gosh, you know, that really is what I feel. And it makes it much more powerful, much more emotional. Yeah, I personally find if I'm learning something, I do read out loud to myself sometimes. And certainly when I was revising for exams and things like that in the past, that's how it worked for me. But I'm aware of the fact that, you know, we all have our different ways. Some people read from text and absorb it much quicker than others. That's just, you know, how it is. But okay, right. So we're moving on. We'll go to the next bit. Just get to my screen. There we go. That's gone from the start. I didn't want to do that, did I? There we go. Okay, so we're going to look at different types of inductions. Now, we've already looked at these two. You've been practicing over the last few weeks the progressive muscle relaxation, one where you're actually doing the muscle tensing and relaxing. I don't know if you've all managed to have a go at that one. So you're actually asking them to tense and release the main muscles in their body. But it's a good one we've discovered for people that do find it a bit harder to actually chill and relax. So
I don't think when we've done practice, we haven't done that one yet because it's not in the training.
Right. Okay, right. Okay.
I don't know if anyone else has, but following from the training, I don't think there's an actual, unless I'm wrong, there's an actual muscle clench and unclenching.
No, you're right, Emma. It's not on there. We haven't done it. We haven't done it.
I'll see if we can get a script for that for tomorrow, and then we can focus on Wednesday, not tomorrow. So we can focus on that. But we've talked a little bit about the differences. The one that most of you have been doing is the one that's relaxation, progressive muscle by relaxation and suggestion. And of course, you've been doing the deepeners and the releases as well. So the progressive muscle relaxation is much more reliant on the imagination. So you're imagining the muscles of the body progressively relaxing. And as you're being told they are, it feels as if they are. So it's like you're really just preparing to just, drop off really and just completely relax. So these ones we've actually looked at, and I will actually look into that for Wednesday and see if we can get a script for you that we can use that's actually making people do that, the actual doing it physically as well. We've also had we've touched on the guided visualization in a sense, because we've used that as the deepener in a lot of cases. So that's really where you're getting the client to visualize. But we always really bring into that as well, sense, feel, maybe pick up on the taste and the smell, all of those different things. So you're opening it up for them, if they're not particularly visual for some reason, to actually feel it or see it as they do. So sometimes you might do a complete sort of induction that is a guided visualization, but so far we've really done it mostly as a deepener, to just take people that little bit further into their own world and sort of just leave the outside world behind. But I mean, imagery can be absolutely anything you want, but the most typical ones you come across are gardens, forests, the sea, that sort of thing. But you might find, as I think we discussed with some of you in the breakout rooms, that you can find out what is the place that your client feels most happy. It might be sitting on top of a mountain somewhere, and that might be where they want to be. Or it might be you could build a visualization around somewhere that they were very happy in some place, So the guided visualization can really be anything you want it to be. And as I said, we tend to use it as a deepener, or we have done. Although you will find as you go on, you won't always use a deepener. Sometimes you will, sometimes you won't. Pacing and leading. Now this is similar really to the progressive muscle relaxation, but it's where you're getting the client to focus on the fact that they are actually beginning to relax. It is a natural thing. So limbs are actually becoming heavier. So as you breathe in through your nose and you breathe out through your mouth, you can feel that heaviness setting in, and you're just giving them further suggestions that they can actually notice that and be aware of what's actually happening. And it just really reinforces the idea that they are going inside and going into that inner world. So very, very similar, really. Instant inductions, I personally don't use these, but they're the sort of thing that most people that come to see you will have seen on TV. They will have seen somebody been put into a trance, just like that, and it's almost like shocking a person into hypnosis. A very sort of a tug or a handshake or a push on the shoulder. And always advise really use that with caution. I mean, I personally don't touch my clients. And if for any reason I was going to touch them, I would warn them that I was going to do that or check in with them first. But it is something there that's available. It is something you can use, but it is usually more as a performance thing, really. So if you were giving a talk, perhaps, and you wanted to show how it worked, it might be a good way to demonstrate that. But as I said, I would say use it with caution, and some people really might not like it. I wouldn't like it personally, but all to your own. The eye gaze fixation. Now this is the one that everybody laughs about, isn't it? Because it was going, oh, look into my eyes, look into my eyes. So we don't tend to use that very much as a general induction, but sometimes where we do use it is at the end of a session, where you might actually have done a really good session with a client. You get to the end of it, you come back to the release, through the release with some really nice suggestions, and before they leave you might do this eye fixation gaze of some positive mantras that have come out of that particular session. But you can use it again, as I said, as an induction if you want to, and it can be very, very effective, and again it's probably quite a good performance one. but it is one that's quite hard to take seriously with all the jokes around it. So the eye gaze and fixation is one, but I do use that sometimes at the end of a session, as I said, and sometimes that can be really powerful, particularly if you've got some really nice positive mantras that you've developed together. Arm levitation, this is a suggestibility one really, where it's like a suggestibility test that you can do, and we are going to focus on suggestibility tests next week. And have a go at doing some of these as well. But
sorry, Debbie.
Yes.
Sorry, so sorry to interrupt. Can I just, with the eye gaze fixation, you know, you're saying how you use it with a mantra. So is that like, you, rather than saying "look into my eyes," you would say whatever the mantra was that you had come up with together?
Just before they leave, I seem to remember Andrew did it to me actually when I went to see Andrew years ago, and it literally said, stand, you know, just as they go to leave, just say, "look into my eyes," and you say those words to them and you get them to say those words back to you.
Okay, so you actually do say the "look into my eyes," but then you say something with it.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
Thank you.
There would be a purpose to that if you used it in that way.
Okay.
I personally don't use it as an induction to put people into hypnosis, but it is a form of, you know, sort of trance, if you like, at that point, that you can actually use at the end of a session. And can be very good. Any other questions about that?
No.
No? Okay. The arm levitation, as I said, is like a suggestibility test, or it can be used for that, because it kind of convinces people it works. So if people come in and they're just like, "Oh, but does it really work? You know, can you really hypnotize me?" And you will come across those sort of people that will come in and say, "Oh, I don't think I can be hypnotized. You know, I don't think it'll work for me." And this is where you will actually physically encourage the client's hand to levitate. And this is quite a good one again to do if you're doing a talk at an association to talk about hypnotherapy and telling people what it is. And it's quite a good one to use as a demonstration. And when we do the suggestibility tests next week, we'll do one of those with you. But it can be quite good to, in a sense, induce the trance, but also to convince the client that it's possible. Now, this is one that, the direct induction. So this is if the client's in the right state of mind, you can literally say, "close your eyes," and just take them where they seem to be going at that time. And this, we will go into this an awful lot more as we get more to the emotional stuff. But this is literally quite often when you hit what we call an emotional hotspot with a client. So they are already in that emotion, they're in that zone, and you can just say, "close your eyes," and they go there. And I've seen, you know, I mean, I've used this, I've also seen Andrew demonstrate this, and you don't need to go through the whole process of an induction for this, because the client is already susceptible, because they are already going inside just by conversational, really. So it's like conversational hypnosis in a sense. There's a quote here from Andrew saying, "sometimes no induction is required because conversation has already achieved that suitable state, and you may be able to ask them to just close their eyes and away you go." So that is something that you can achieve. It isn't something you're always going to achieve, but it's about identifying when that client is ready, and saying, just at that point, just close your eyes, and then you just go to where, or they'll go to wherever they need to go. So that is something that's possible. A couple of other techniques here as well, the mirroring technique, making the same gestures. So I mean, some of you may have come across this before. It's something you talk about quite a lot in NLP, and it's something that some of us tend to do quite naturally. So, you know, you do it even in verbal talking, you're sort of repeating back phrases that people say to kind of confirm your understanding. And we will do, you know, we will do much more about how we question and how we build that rapport with clients. But it's almost in a sense, when you give the words back to the client, that's quite powerful, and it also tells them you're listening. You know, you're on board with them, you're actually listening. So it's a very, very effective way to actually build the client's trust. But also I think sometimes, again, some of us innately do that. You want to make somebody feel comfortable, and you do find your mirroring. So again, it's another good way to help that person to relax enough. So by the time you get to doing the hypnosis itself, they're already kind of on board with you, and more compliant than they might have been. The stealth technique. This is one where we've quite often been in one of these trances when you've been in a very, very boring lecture. I hope you're not in one right now. But it's when you are, sometimes it can be confused. So you actually just go into a trance because you can't understand what's being said anyway. And there are certain inductions. I don't know if we've actually got it in the handbook anymore, but so there used to be like a confusion induction, which really eventually people just give in because it's the boredom sets in, or that the inability to understand just makes them switch off and they just go into a dreamlike state. I've personally never actually used it on anybody apart from in sessions like this, but it is a technique that you can use. And as I said, we're all capable of going into this state quite easily if we've just switched off. I used to do it all the time at school, constantly daydreaming. So that's another technique there as well. Okay, so I mean, in terms of what Andrew believes, and from his experience and from my own experience as well now, there really are no limitations in the way that you can actually help people to go into hypnosis. And because basically what you're trying to do is just get them to just cut off and disassociate from their awareness in what's going on now, and just get them to go inside into their own world. So you will find, over a period of time, you will find your own ways of doing this, and you will start to put together bits that you like from one to another, and you'll come up with your own inductions based on your own experience and your own personal style as well. So you can use a combination of any of those things I've talked about, and probably, you know, you will already be starting to see that you'll want to pick and choose a little bit of some of the inductions that you've been reading. Okay, so there are no set rules as to which induction is the best. There are certain ones that will be better for certain people. If, you know, as I said, like we said, if somebody really finds it difficult to relax, there are certain ones that you can actually do. There's one here that I haven't mentioned. It's a fraction, I think it's fractionalization it's called, where you are encouraging people to open and close their eyes throughout it, which is quite good again for people that find it hard to relax. I personally find that really uncomfortable because I just want to go. If I'm being hypnotized, I just want to go inside and just relax and enjoy the experience. But again, that's another one. But we will come up to that as we go through the modules, and we will have some practice with that as well. So that is another version of another type of induction that we can do. Okay, so I'm going to move on and talk a little bit now about some of the different therapeutic approaches. And the reason I'm going to talk about them, and I'm not going to go into massive depth about all of these, just an overview, and some of you will already be aware of some of these, but a lot of these different modalities will be part of how we will work with clients over time. Because the approach that Andrew takes, the Andrew Parr combined approach, does bring together a lot of these different things. You know, when most of you signed up for this course, you will have said that it covers all of these different areas. It isn't just about hypnotherapy. So it's quite important to understand what some of these things are, because a lot of your clients will have possibly been through some of these things before they come to you. Hypnotherapy seems to quite often be the thing where it's just like, oh, last resort, you know, nothing else has worked, I'll try hypnotherapy. Because obviously there's still quite a lot of talk around, does it work? Will it work for me? That sort of thing. So a lot of these people might have been through these things already. So it's useful to know. So if we just go through these one by one, because as I said, you will inherit people that will have done these or might still be doing it at the same time. So counselling, I believe we've got a couple of counsellors among us, haven't we? And anybody put their hand up who's done counselling? I thought we did have, okay, right, no problem. So counselling, any of you that might have had counselling will know that it's about providing a safe space, which we also do, where people can come and talk about how they feel about certain situations, maybe their emotions, explore how they feel, why they feel that way. And a counsellor will typically ask lots and lots of questions. And sometimes you'll find people will come to you who've been to a counsellor and they'll say, well, they just asked me lots of questions. And they did listen to me, but they didn't really help me. But some of them do. So I don't want to knock counselling, because we do an element of that as well. So typically they will ask lots of questions, delving into that person, how they think, how they feel, how they're behaving. And there's a lot of active listening that goes on. And the idea normally is that a counsellor will invite the client, the patient, whatever you want to call them, to consider their world and their situation from a different perspective, to help them understand their own feelings. So it's about helping them to understand why they feel the way they do, why they think the way they do, why they act the way they do. And the encouragement is to help them find their own solutions to problems. Generally, a counsellor shouldn't really advise or tell you what to do. So that's, in a nutshell, very brief description of counselling. These days, like all of the things really I'm going to talk about, it can be face-to-face. It can be in groups sometimes, particularly with things like CBT, which I'll touch on in a moment. It can even be on the phone. I believe there's something called iChat that some people have used as well. You can do it on email. And then obviously a lot of counselling can happen on Zoom. And this can be couples counselling as well, so it's not always one-to-one. So most of the things that, the different therapeutic approaches are available in lots of different ways these days. So that's counselling. Coaching. Now, quite a lot of people that go into hypnotherapy training will quite often set themselves up as a coach as well. But some people are just coaches in general. There's a lot of different types of coaches out there making all sorts of different types of claims, depending on what their specialism is. And there's lots of different specialisms that people have. Generally, a life coach would be about goals, about something in the future that they're working towards. So finding tactics, finding strategies to help them get to those goals and exceed those goals. So it might even be somebody that is wanting to set up their business, and what are the things that are in their way and how can they move past that. So there'll be lots of probing questions and encouraging them, again, to perhaps change perspective in the same way as a counsellor might, but it's very, very forward looking. It's very much about taking action, perhaps setting up action plans and so on. It's about empowering the person to do what they need to do. It's incredibly goal orientated. Again, non-advisory. So you are sort of, helping them to find their own solutions, but with a bit of input, non-judgmental, as with any of these therapeutic approaches, and very much collaborative. So very much on the same level, helping this person to achieve whatever it is that they want to achieve. Psychotherapy. Now, psychotherapy, generally, again, that's a very broad banner for quite a few different types of things, which is developed over time. So any of you that have looked into psychology, you'll know that it all comes out of Freud and Jung, and it's all sort of developed into many different types of therapy, generally helping us with the same sort of issues that people might come to see you about. So emotional issues, mental health challenges, sometimes psychiatric disorders as well. So quite often a psychotherapist might work with a psychiatrist as well, because something that psychotherapists can't do is diagnose. But they may see indicators of things where they might then need to work with a psychiatrist who would diagnose. So we don't diagnose either. That's something that we would never do. So a psychotherapist could fall into any of these categories below, but generally they're all about sort of working with the client. Again, it's a collaborative thing to help them to understand why they feel, act and behave the way they do, and helping them to understand, maybe accept, and come to some sort of resolution around that. Sometimes people can be in some form of psychotherapy for quite a long time. It can be quite long term, generally can be years, can be months, and usually it's quite regular. Now, some of the things that come under psychotherapy, cognitive behavioural therapy, which is more about sort of helping people to understand why they think, feel and behave the way they do, and literally sort of giving them tools, helping them to deal with negative emotions and so on. And it's mainly forward looking again. So it might be understanding why they are, but they won't be delving too much into the past really. Psychodynamic therapy, which is taken really from psychoanalysis, and it has quite a lot of elements of that, but it is again much more probing, looking into things from the past. Dialectical behaviour therapy, DBT, is a fairly recent thing. Was developed initially for people with borderline personality disorder, and that's again about helping people to understand different perspectives, because I believe that from borderline personality disorder point of view, it's quite hard for them to do that. So that's where it kind of developed from. But this is quite a popular form of therapy these days. You've got humanistic and experiential therapy, which is things like Gestalt therapy, which is about the whole person. It's very person-centered, and it's about taking responsibility for your own behavior, your own actions, and so on. Obviously, there's a lot more to it than that. Gestalt therapy is a massive thing, as is, other forms of humanistic therapy. Integrative therapists, which is, as you would imagine, combining many different approaches and modalities. And then you've got psychoanalysis as well. So there's all of these different things that just come under that. And there's probably other things that we could add to that as well. But it just gives you an overview of some of the things that would be under that banner. CBT I touched on there, which is exploring the connection between thoughts, feelings and behaviours. And you'll see there's a lot of links to that in what we do as well. So again, as I said, giving them strategies, quite often homework. It's usually a set period of time, CBT, between 6 and 12 sessions. It's one of those things that's recommended by the NHS all the time. Not always appropriately, I don't think, in my experience, and they do it quite often in groups as well. So it can be group therapy for CBT. Generally, as I said, it's a short-term thing, and it's future focused. So that's CBT. Then you've got clinical hypnotherapy, which I will come back to in a moment, because we're going to look at the differences between clinical and what we call analytical hypnotherapy. But this is another thing under the therapeutic approaches. Clinical hypnotherapy, you'll see a lot of people will advertise themselves as a clinical hypnotherapist, and it sounds somehow a little bit more important. Actually, it's just a hypnotherapist working with people with any of the disorders that we could work with. But a lot of people assume that it means a lot more, perhaps. It's generally what we call solution focus, which again is focusing on the solution, which of course all forms of therapy is, but rather than looking back. Okay, so it's about working with positive suggestions, and obviously in terms of hypnotherapy, working with the subconscious mind and helping to access that subconscious mind to actually achieve those positive solutions, but without digging too deep. There's a quote here from the NCH. Clinical hypnotherapy means using advanced methods of hypnosis and other techniques to create a variety of medical and psychological problems. So anything that you will be able to do at the end of this course. And then you've got analytical hypnotherapy, which is a form of hypnotherapy that wants to get to the root. Okay, so looking at, so we have a problem, we have a surface symptom, if you like, but we don't know why that's there. So it's using hypnotherapy and quite often regression to actually go a little bit deeper and actually help to resolve the problems that cause the symptoms in the first place. So it usually is regression that helps us to get there. Now we will come back to these two things in a moment, but they're the two forms. Okay, and we'll go into a little bit more depth about that in a little while. Now, the reason I've spoken about some of these different types of therapeutic approaches that we can take is because Andrew takes that combined approach, as I said, which is what you're being trained to do. So it's about creating that safe place for your clients, just as a counsellor would, and you will find sometimes you'll be working with your clients in a sense a little bit like a counsellor. Sometimes you'll work slightly longer term with your clients, sometimes it will be much shorter. I find quite often I'll work with a client on a short-term basis and then they'll come back and see me every now and then for various different things. So it is, again, as I said, about creating that safe space. And once you've built a rapport with the client, quite often you're the person they want to come and see. So because you've got this very, very sort of broad spectrum of skills, or you will have at the end of the course, it means that you can help in that context as well. We can help them to go to root causes by using regression therapy and natural hypnosis, which is how Andrew terms it, natural hypnosis, because it's a very, very natural state of mind. And it's a state of mind that we're all in a lot of the time, and can reach to create goals and outcomes. So that's very much where the coaching context can come in. So if you're working with somebody who's maybe is suffering from a lack of confidence, for example, and wants to achieve more in their business, you might be helping with them in a more of a coaching aspect. And then you'd be then trying to dig into what those limiting beliefs might be. Or you might work in a very solution-focused approach, which I'll come to in a moment. You're working with them on both levels, consciously and subconsciously, and you're obviously trying to bring the two together so that you can help them to achieve whatever those goals might be. And those goals might just be to be happy, or to feel more confident about themselves, to lose weight, to stop smoking. There's so many different things that we can work with. But we're actually working with all of these different approaches here. You will have the tools to bring in all of these different things. And as we go through the course, you're going to bring in more and more sort of different techniques that you can use whilst you're working with your client in hypnosis. So it's, as I said, it's good to be aware of some of these, and you might want to go away and read up a bit more on some of those things that you don't know much about, just so that when somebody says, oh, I've been working with a psychotherapist, you have some idea what they might have, been experiencing, or if they've had counselling, again, you might have more idea how that might be approached. I tend to inherit quite a lot of people that have done CBT, usually because they haven't had enough. It hasn't gone on for long enough, because it's a very set time period quite often. So it's just worth remembering at the end of all this, you are going to have this array of different skills that you can take, which in a sense makes you like an integrative therapist that uses hypnotherapy, which is great. You've got a lot of skills that you will take with you. So if you look at this is, looking directly at what Andrew's saying here. So the common factor in all these approaches. So if I was to just put that out there to you all now, so what is the common factor, do you think, in all these different therapeutic approaches?
Do you want us to answer?
Pardon? Yeah.
Okay. Well, I would say it's all giving somebody a safe space to discuss worries and troubles and get to the root cause, hopefully, and find the solution.
Absolutely. Finding a solution is definitely pretty much everybody that comes in the door is going to want to do that. You will find some people don't want to go to the root cause, because that's very scary. So I'm currently working with somebody at the moment who wants all the things. I want to feel better, I want to feel like I'm not worried about rejection, I'm not worried about this, that, but I don't want to go in that room and find out why. So you will come across that resistance, but ultimately that is the most effective way to get there, yes. Any other common factors you can see with all of these approaches?
Sorry, can I just ask, what do you do then if you have someone who wants a solution but doesn't want to go through that door, as you say? What do you do?
Well, there are some times where you will have somebody who is so ready. We'll talk a little bit more about the solution-focused approach, where they're ready to go, if you like. They've done a lot of work on themselves, perhaps, or maybe they are just ready to take that step, and they just need that extra push that you can give them, and their resistance is low because they're ready to go. If you do have somebody, like I sort of explained with this particular client, who is like, well, I want all the results, but I don't really want to go through all the bad stuff to get there. In that sort of situation, you can work with what they believe to begin with. What I've personally done in this situation is said, look, I'll be totally honest with you, you might get a temporary fix from this, and you might feel a lot better for a while, but actually if we really dig into the roots, you're going to have a much more permanent transformation. So I would be honest with them and say that if, you know, and especially in this situation with this particular client, there's clearly a lot of baggage there. There's a lot of stuff that is creating this situation that is recycling itself permanently. So it's a bit of a challenge. So, but some people, you know, I normally say in my sort of first call with clients that is the way I like to work. You know, let's find out why you do what you do, and then we can actually open the doors, if you like, to help you create that positive solution. But not everybody will need that, and not every situation will need that. So I'm not going to say that the solution-focused approach doesn't work for some people, because it does. So, okay. Anything? I mean, ultimately, what are all the people? You know, what are all of these different therapists trying to achieve for the person? So a solution, obviously. Anything else you can think of?
They're giving them the tools to help themselves.
Absolutely, yeah. Absolutely. And I think that's the thing. You will find sometimes you'll have a client sit down in front of you and say, so you're going to make me do this? No, I'm not going to make you do anything. I'm going to help you to do what it is that you need to do. And you are giving them the tools. And the tools they have, you know, as I said, the title of Andrew's book, The Real You, it's all there. It's all there. It's about accessing it. So, yeah, that's a really, really good point. Anything else?
Help them achieve goals.
Yeah, absolutely. And ultimately, everybody's got a goal, haven't they, when they come in, whatever it is, even if it is just to feel, you know, I want to feel more comfortable doing presentations, or I want to just feel more comfortable in my own skin. They're all goals in some sense. Yeah. And anything else at all that you can think of? I mean, I'm sure there's
I feel like it would be lasting and positive change.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Yeah. And lasting and positive change is something that comes if they're prepared to go where they need to go. So, and as I said, I think like Tom said as well, it's about helping them. You're working with them, you're collaborating with them, really, aren't you, to help them create change, which they will do. You will just facilitate that. I quite often will call myself, I'm a facilitator. I'm facilitating, helping you to facilitate that change. I'm not going to make that change, you are. So, okay, anything else anybody wants to add in terms of what else you think, you know, where, you know, if you look at all of those different approaches, which you can take and you will be able to take, other ways that they might cross over with each other in some way. Don't worry if you can't think about it now. But, I mean, I think, as I said, it's quite clear that ultimately all of those approaches have got the same sort of goals in mind, and we just do it all in slightly different ways. And the great thing about the Andrew Parr approach is that we are taking a little bit from all of those things and being able to pick and choose what parts of those we need to use with each individual client. So every client has a very bespoke experience. You know, there won't be an Andrew Parr script that you go out there and do. Or, you know, there will be a structure that you can follow, but you will over time develop your own way of delivering that. And ultimately, every single client is different. So, so it's worth, as I said, just looking at those approaches there and just deepening your knowledge a little bit on that, and just reading around it a little bit more so you can just understand those things. Because when somebody comes in and they tell you, you know, I've been seeing a CBT practitioner, it's really helpful for you to really understand what that means. What they might have been going through. Okay. So moving on to the different types of hypnotherapy. Now, before we do that, does anybody need a quick break, or are you all okay?
Do you mind if I have a quick break? Thanks. Is
Yeah,
that
sure.
okay? Thank you.
No problem. Shall I give you all 5 minutes so you can just grab a cup of tea, quickly use the loo or whatever you need to do, and then we'll be back on. But if you could make it 5 minutes, then we can crack on if that's okay. You are? Okay, so moving on and just going into a little bit more depth about those differences between the different types of hypnotherapy. Okay, so obviously I think we've all sort of established any therapist is trying to, in some sense, bring about some sort of goal, solution, some form of change, because that's why somebody's come to see us. And it's possibly a combination of all these different things. Ultimately, like those very sort of familiar words from CBT, really, we're trying to help people to change the way they think, they feel, and they behave. Quite often, as I said, it's all of those things together. So in order to do that, they need to create a new frame of reference, perhaps see things from a slightly different perspective, and just look at their world in a slightly different way. So ultimately, most of the people that come to see you, for whatever reason, whatever sort of symptom they may have, what surface symptom perhaps they have, you're essentially trying to help them to change their beliefs in some way. They have got some form of limiting belief that's holding them back from what it is they want to do. So using that combination of those different approaches, whichever ones seem applicable, it helps you to help them. And they basically fall into these two types of hypnotherapy. So there's suggestion therapy and analytical. And when you come to the analytical side, you're quite often using suggestion therapy as part of that as well. So if we start with the suggestion therapy now, suggestion therapy is all about suggesting ideas. Now, they're not your ideas. You're helping them to find what it is that they want. So we're very much keen to make sure that whatever we are helping clients to believe, if you like, and change about themselves, is ideas that they want, and it's about their world, not our world. We don't just put words into their mouth in any way. And when we come to sort of looking at how we question and interview our clients initially, you'll start to understand how we very much work with the client's own words, not our own. Because, as I said, I think we've said before, hypnosis is self-hypnosis. So if you say something that's a word that perhaps jars with them in some way, they're not going to accept it. They're not going to like it. So a therapist is all about suggesting ideas that work with that client. And what you're really wanting to do is make sure that those suggestions stay with them. So after they leave that session with you, they might be feeling great while they're there. So they might be feeling, I'm completely calm now and I feel so relaxed. We want them to take that with them in some way, even after they've actually finished the session. So that's what we're talking about, post-hypnotic suggestions. So if the client can accept those suggestions, then they're going to begin to respond to any suggested ideas that you might have for them, which have really been formed by themselves through your conversation and your collaboration, and that helps them to form their own sort of new sort of frame of reference and ideas about the world. So you've got different types of suggestion therapy, of which you may use different types yourself. So there's different ways in which you can sort of deliver these. So you've got direct suggestion, which might be a little bit more commanding. So more like, you will feel confident, you will be relaxed. More indirect suggestion, which you'll find is probably more Andrew's style, would be not stated exactly. It might be, you're going to be really surprised how you notice yourself feeling so much more relaxed. So it's not quite so commanding. I think the old school way tends to be much more direct suggestion. Whereas I would say that the way that Andrew would encourage would be very much more gentle, if you like, in most respects. Visualization, so you might say things like, just imagine yourself feeling really confident, you know? So you're actually getting them to visualize and imagine the outcome that they really want. The statements that you will help the client to create, and sometimes they will just say, will help them to create the result that they want. And this is where it becomes so important that it's their words. You help them to produce mantras, not that you make up for them, that come from their own words, which again, we will talk much more about in depth, how we do that with clients later on. But statements that help them to, you know, they're going to be more believable if they've created them themselves. They're going to be more powerful. So things like, I'm capable, you know, I can be confident. I will be confident. I am capable. So very, very personalized, bespoke mantras for them. And then we've got metaphors. which again, a little bit later on in the course, we spend quite a lot of time on metaphors, but that's how you can perhaps create stories, personal stories for clients. Now, again, they work differently with different people. Some people are very, very open to metaphors. In fact, some people speak in metaphors. As I say, I have a client who just constantly talks in metaphors. So it's great, really easy to create metaphors for him because he kind of creates them for himself before he's even walked in. But it's about creating metaphors that are very personal to them, so very, very bespoke to them. So suggestion therapy, I mean, every form of hypnotherapy that we do is going to have suggestions in it at some point. But in terms of the two approaches that are taken, you've got some hypnotherapists that will very much just call themselves a solution-focused hypnotherapist. You'll quite often see it's a clinical hypnotherapist as well. I mentioned clinical hypnotherapy earlier on, which, as I say, a lot of people think, oh, that sounds much more important. It sounds very medical. But actually, most clinical hypnotherapists are solution-focused therapists. And you can call yourself a clinical hypnotherapist at the end of this, if that's what you want to specialize in. So a solution-focused hypnotherapist will be much more focused on the symptom, if you like, rather than what caused the symptom. So they'll want to focus on the positive, looking for probably much more immediate solutions. So somebody that comes to you perhaps to stop smoking might be more of a solution-focused approach, because they want you to deliver those positive mantras, which you'll work on with them to help them do what they need to do. But they don't necessarily want to go any further into that. They just want a positive outcome without going into any depth. So it's mostly focused on what's happening with them now and what's going to happen in the future, much like something like CBT, I suppose. And the idea is a positive solution, which all of them obviously want to. And visualizing what it is they want and positive metaphors that might help them to sort of visualize that and achieve that. And there are, as I said, there's a lot of hypnotherapists that are only trained in that approach. And they don't delve into the hypnoanalytical. And that's fine, there's a place for that, but it won't go deep. So if there is something that's sticking, that's stopping somebody doing what they want to do, or is making them do something they don't want to do in some way, a solution-focused approach may be a bit of a sort of a sticky plaster, really. So it might work for 20 years, but it does mean that it probably doesn't completely go away. It might work for a month or a week. Or if they're at a point where they are so ready for this, it might absolutely be fine, because their mind is going to accept that solution and they're going to believe it. And it's all about belief. It's all about believing that this is going to be what's going to happen for them.
Debbie, could I just ask a question on that?
Of course, yeah.
I did my first ever stop smoking session, and she'd been smoking for 54 years. And after one session, she stopped for 3 months. But I always thought that there was something much deeper, the reasons why she had reached for the cigarette. So we literally just did a stop smoking session, like it was almost like a script I used, to be honest. But it did work for 3 months. So now I'm going to see her again. And I actually think it's more about some sort of anxiety and stress, which is why she reaches for the cigarettes. Yes. So is that what that means? Is that, yeah.
I personally, we will do a section on not smoking, particularly weight loss and all of those different things. But I personally treat smoking or like any other session.
Okay.
I don't make big promises about the fact that, well, not that you should make any big promises anyway, but I don't say, right, I'm going to do 2 sessions and at the end of that you're going to be finished smoking, because there might be something else underneath that. So I'm always very honest about any potential client with that. So you've got a perfect example of that.
Yes, there was something much deeper. It wasn't just, okay. Thank you.
She could have come in, she could have been so ready and it could have been absolutely fine. And she could have been not smoking forever and it was just the right time and she had a big enough reason. But, it isn't always the case. So as I said, I don't want to say that solution-focused therapy isn't a good thing. it is appropriate in a lot of cases, but sometimes there's more beneath the surface.
Okay.
So thank you for that. That's it.
Thank
Any
you.
other questions on that? No. Okay. So the good things and the bad things about solution focused therapy. For somebody who doesn't want to go through all their stuff and doesn't want to go there for whatever reason, it's great, because they're not going to have to revisit past memories and all the rest of it. They don't have to go there, because they're going to take a very much looking forward, very much future approach with a positive outcome. And, you know, as that example said there, sometimes that's going to be fine because they're ready. They've got a big enough reason to do it. Their mind is ready and they can take that information. And we're going to talk next week about something called the critical faculty, which will help you understand a little bit more what's going on when people don't accept. So that is one advantage for some people. It does require commitment, and I say commitment to the result, if you like. You know, I am going to give up smoking, and you know, they really need to believe it. And the way we approach the not smoking, as you'll see when we get to it, is your client's pretty much given up before they even go into trance, because that's the only way that's really going to work, you know, in that particular moment anyway. So you won't talk about whatever you want. It's going to be a very, very focused approach. So whereby if you're working with somebody over a longer period of time and perhaps digging into old stuff that might need to be released, it might be they might actually be talking about what happened today and how that links to whatever they're feeling. Whereas with a solution focused approach, it is going to be much more focused, right? This is what we're going to do. As I said, it can't help with everything. It won't always work, but if it does and your client's ready and they're committed to it, it can be incredibly quick. You know, they can come in, have one session and just go, wow, you know, I can't believe that, you know, after all these years, and I just don't do that anymore. It's great. So there's lots of good things. And
Debbie,
yes.
sorry, can I just ask, so when it's not so much solution focused, and you said you work with them longer term, how much longer term, like how many sessions?
How long's a piece of string? It really varies. I mean, when I say long term, it's not like a psychotherapist who might be for years. It's never like that. It might be that you might go through 3 sessions, you might go for 6, it might be 12 sometimes. It really depends on the level of issues that client's got, and how many limiting beliefs you're working with, and how resistant they are as well. Sometimes a client can be resistant, not deliberately resistant, it's just old stuff and it's been there a long time. So, you know, I don't want to say that you can just, I never would say, yes, we can fix this in 3 sessions, because I don't know. I don't know if we can fix that in 3 sessions, because I don't know until I start working with that client what's really going on.
But by and large, like sort of 3 to 6 for...
I would say on average with clients, I would work 3 to 6 sessions. But as I said, it's hard to say an average because it really depends what you're working with. But yes, I mean, I guess people are going to ask you when they inquire.
That's what I was thinking. People are going to say, like, how many, because obviously they'll be coming to us largely because they don't want to work with somebody long term, I would have thought, like to a degree. I don't know, but
yeah, I think something you need to do with clients is to take away that idea that I'm going to do magic. Because it can seem that way, and I think sometimes it's literally people will say, can you make me do this? No, I can't make you do anything you don't want to do. It's all about giving them control back, and it is difficult to say exactly until that person's in front of you. So I think you can give an average, and I quite often will give an average and say, we might, depending on how it is, it might be 1 session. Could be 6, it could be more. It really does depend. And it is very much about working with who's in front of you and what comes up with them. Because they might come for one thing and a whole load of other stuff will unravel with that. So they might end up working with you much longer than they expect. But yeah, it's always best to be as honest as you can be. Okay, I hope that helps.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, that's helpful.
Okay, so analytical hypnotherapy, this is where it gets a bit meaty. And when we get to actually doing more of this within the course, it obviously gets a little bit more serious. It's obviously about taking a much more psychodynamic approach, really. So it's quite often referred to as hypnoanalysis, and it's where you are looking to find out what is the cause of the problem. So not just this is the symptom, it's actually going down under the layers, you know, peeling back the onion skin layers, if you like, and seeing what's actually causing this trigger, this response, and actually helping people to shift that and release that so that actually they really can have a long-lasting, hopefully permanent sort of transformation and result. So generally, I would say most of the people I work with, I tend to take this approach. Now, part of that is because that's the clients that are sat in front of me, and it might be that I got a lot of solution, just purely solution focused, and that would be the approach I took. But I find that most of the time, that's what I work with. Now, different types of forms or different types of techniques that you can use, and there's more than just this because there's lots of techniques we use within this, but you can have what we call regression to cause, so going back to what caused it. Now, sometimes it might be the client really thinks they know what the cause is, and I can tell you now quite often the thing they think it isn't. Quite often, if you've got the client into that relaxed state where they have literally shut down the sort of overthinking mind to some extent, because obviously it never completely switches off, they can actually follow the feeling, and quite often what they thought was the cause wasn't the cause, it was something else. Not forgotten, just not realizing quite how significant that might be. But sometimes it is the cause, and you can just go straight to that cause and regress them back to that moment. You can do progressive age regression, so you go back through the years, and then you've got free regression. Sometimes you might just follow a feeling, which I use quite a lot, is where you focus on the feeling perhaps that client might have, which is, you know, maybe it's I really don't feel like I'm good enough for whatever reason, and they will free regress to that place, or they might just go back through the years. You might go back through in age regression, say let's follow all the different times that you felt like that. So there's lots of different ways that you can do that. You can have complete free association, just let their mind go wherever it seems to want to go. You can also do that with, you know, spontaneous age regression, and also then there's past life regression as well, which we come to a little bit later, so we will cover that. So there's lots of different types of ways in which we can use analytical hypnotherapy, and not all the work is done whilst they're in trance. A lot of the conversational stuff will give us the information that will help them and us to know the right thing to do. So the key things to remember really is that analytical hypnotherapy is much more about understanding what has caused that feeling that they have, what has caused that feeling that perhaps they have when they don't want to be in a small space, or maybe they're afraid of an open space, or, you know, it's digging beneath the surface. So in the example of smoking, sometimes people will be just so ready to give it up in every way, but equally there might be another reason that habit has formed, just like with food, that might need us to dig into sort of emotions and feelings a little bit more. So when we get to the differences between, as I said, this is probably where it gets a little bit more sort of emotional, and this is where your client will possibly have what we call nab reactions sometimes, when we get to that feeling that really is triggering them, and we follow that feeling. So that's your analytical hypnotherapy. So I'm going to ask you to do the same again with this, just looking at the two here, analytical hypnotherapy and solution focused hypnotherapy. And I just want you to talk to each other about your understanding of the two different types, okay? Chances are you're all going to do both of these with different clients. Some of you might say, actually, I just want to be a solution focused hypnotherapist, and that's fine. Some of you might find you do more of the other. But what I want you to do is just to have a chat to each other about the pros and cons of each, your understanding of what each is and the differences, and think about what they're trying to achieve, and perhaps again where they cross over. Okay, so Heather, if you can just put us into groups again for probably about 15 minutes, and just to chat to each other about the differences with these. Thank you for
Oh,
doing
no. I have a request. I've explained the library model to two of my groups, and the other two haven't, and they say it's kind of helpful.
that.
So
Right.
you remember that when we did the picture of the library model last week? So when you're looking at the monkey jumping up and down in the beginning, if we
Are
work,
you recording again?
yeah, I'm recording this.
Okay, sorry.
If we're working with calming the monkey down, that's solution focused therapy.
Oh,
Okay. If we want to help change someone's beliefs and it's okay for them to accept that, that's suggestion therapy and it works. If there's something in them that says, yeah, right, you don't really believe that, who the hell do you think you are? And the little voice starts kicking off, then you need to go to the next level, which is looking at the books behind, pulling the books out. Are these books still valid? Do they need to be looked at a different way? So the library model takes you through the 3 levels of what we've just been explaining.
That's really helpful, actually. Heather.
Yeah, it is.
So the first level, keeping the monkey quiet, that's solution focused. If you want to change someone's beliefs and it's okay for them to do that and they can accept that, that's the suggestion work. If they can't accept that, because we need to look at more of the root causes, then we need to go to the books at the back, which is where we do the regression work. Why do you believe? I wonder why you believe that. I wonder who's told you that. Because a lot of what we do, we're not actually adding things, we're mostly taking things away. Because most of our lives, we've actually taken on board other people's ideas about us. And I was saying about if someone at school, if a teacher at school tells you you can't do maths, you're absolutely useless at maths. You may be the world's greatest mathematician, but if you believe that you can't do it, you can't do it. Because you've been hypnotized into believing that. And those thoughts that then run around in your head, and we don't tend to question our own thoughts. There are thoughts, they must be true. They're my thoughts, but they might not necessarily be true, but we don't check it out. And that's what a lot of our clients will come with. They have all this story running around in their head, all these belief systems. And sometimes you just sit there and think, I wonder why you believe that. Oh, well, my mother told me that. Oh, and you believed her? Oh, I guess I did. Oh, that's her idea, not my idea. Does that help?
Yeah.
really does, yeah.
That's great, Heather. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
So we're kind of almost taking a virus out of the program, aren't we? In a sense that I was listening to Bruce Lipton the other day. I don't know if any of you read Bruce Lipton, Biology of Belief, and he was just saying how we are up to the age of 7. We are programmed. We are programmed with all these beliefs and all of these thoughts and things that are not our own. So, like Heather says, it's almost like we are dehypnotizing people from those beliefs that are not necessarily their own. In a lot of cases, we're not making that distinction between what's right and what isn't. We just believe it because it's been programmed into us. So that's what we're trying to help people deal with, manage, erase, change, all those different things. Okay, right. Okay, so just coming on to the final section, just a quick run over contraindications, which I think Maria had already started to talk to about her group. So obviously hypnotherapy can help a lot of people, and there's a lot of contraindications that a lot of hypnotherapists will not touch at all, whereas Andrew has had experience where he can work with some of these people. So we'll go through those in a moment. But in Andrew's experience, the only times that hypnotherapy doesn't work, if you like, or won't be effective, is when there's some problem with comprehension or inability to interact with you in some way, because obviously the whole process is very interactive. You need to be working with somebody. And what I always say to clients is, I'm not working for you, I'm working with you. We're working together, we're collaborating. So anything that might inhibit that would be somebody that can't interact with you, that can't concentrate or hold an idea. And that can be sometimes children that are too young. I work with quite a lot of children and teenagers, but occasionally you'll get a child that just isn't emotionally switched on enough to be able to hold that idea. And that might not always be an age thing. Inability to use imagination can be difficult, and that doesn't necessarily mean visual imagination. Just because somebody isn't visual doesn't mean they don't have an imagination. There's lots of other different ways we can work with them, with the senses. And some people will tell you, I've got no imagination, because they're not very visual, but that's very rarely true. And then obviously the inability to understand what's actually happening, what you're talking about. All of these will be things that will get in the way of working with somebody in a hypnotherapy context. So some of the examples that you'll come across, and these are all in your handbook, people with dementia or Alzheimer's, something like that. Obviously, there's going to be an issue there. Although there are examples these days where the hypnosis has helped to relax people with dementia. Individuals with psychotic disorders, very young children, as I mentioned, sometimes they can just be a little bit too young. Difficult to say what that age is. Generally, sometimes you can work with somebody who's about 7, but sometimes that's just going to be too young, dependent on the child. Anybody that's under the influence of alcohol. So if you're working with somebody who has a drink problem, obviously when they come to see you, they cannot be under the influence, and the same applies to drugs. So you would need to turn them away at that point. In that instance, you might want to continue to work with them, but you would not work with them while they were under the influence. And then somebody that was seriously intellectually challenged in some way. So certain learning disabilities and so on like that may stop people being able to engage with hypnotherapy. Some of these conditions here listed, and I'm sure you could add to this, and I think Marie might have actually had a few there that she was going to mention as well. But these are things sometimes that some hypnotherapists will say do not work with these people. But again, in Andrew's experience, he has worked with some of these categories, but you would need to definitely work with them with care and caution. So some of those, as you can see, epilepsy, somebody with a very serious heart condition could be an issue, because sometimes, particularly if you're doing analytical hypnotherapy, it can be very, very emotional. Extremely high blood pressure, same sort of category really. Depression, they say here. Now, I've certainly worked with people with depression, and I know Andrew has, so that doesn't always apply. But again, proceed with care. Sometimes you may be working with somebody who's suicidal, for example. Again, you would obviously have to be very careful. And if you didn't feel confident with that, then don't do it. Refer to somebody else or to another professional. Sometimes very elderly, dependent on their health and so on. Somebody who persistently uses alcohol and drugs too much. I've certainly worked with a few people who have been drug abusers, who have been fine in the session, but they're very, very unreliable, or can be sometimes. But that's not to say that's all of them. That just seems to have been a couple that I've had in that situation. Pregnancy, you need to, again, proceed with caution. We'll before we finish today as well. People on medication, again, you can work with people on medication. The thing about that is that it would depend on the sort of medication they were on, but it does sometimes dumb down the emotions if people are on things for antidepressants. And because quite often we are working with the emotions, that can mean the impact won't be quite so strong. But you will find quite a lot of your clients sometimes will be on some form of medication. So again, just proceed with care. Pathological personalities, bipolar, and various other psychotic disorders as well, and suicidal tendencies. So all of these, certainly in the early stages of your sort of works as a practitioner, probably to avoid initially. But once your confidence builds and you feel confident, just take care really, and decide whether you want to. It might be that you just think, no, I'm not comfortable with that, I don't want to, and that will be your choice. In relation to pregnancy, people working with people that are pregnant, obviously hypnobirthing is a big thing. And I've put a name here, Anna Biotti, who you will see on the main big Facebook page, the one that's got lots of members in. If you want to know more about that, she does run at certain points hypnobirthing courses. So sometimes, although pregnancy is stated as a contraindication, I think some of it depends on the where they are in the pregnancy. So in the first trimester, I think most things when somebody's pregnant, we proceed with caution. But you might be able to do something very gentle like relaxation and anything sort of very positive, positively suggestive would be fine. But to definitely keep away from anything that might be very emotional for them in a negative way, certainly. Generally, the thoughts are that it's safe to work with the deeper issues in the second trimester. But again, proceed with care, and it depends on the individual and what other history is attached to them. And then in the third trimester, considered to be very beneficial, particularly if it's related again to hypnobirthing. So there's a lot of information out there about hypnobirthing, and we don't particularly have a module on that. So if it is something that you would like to sort of take further, as I said, Anna's definitely somebody I know of, but I'm sure there's other people as well. So that's pregnancy and childbirth, and it can be, as I said, very, very sort of beneficial. My youngest daughter just recently used it quite a lot, and it was very, very helpful for her. So wish I'd known about it when I did. That was a long time ago. Okay, so just wrapping up for today, just a bit of a summary of where we've been today. This is really, we've come to the end of module 1, and we'll be going over the assignments tomorrow. But hopefully throughout the modules so far, we've gathered a lot about how we collect experiences and how this can affect our beliefs, how we collect that programming really, that sometimes gives us limiting beliefs about ourselves. We've looked at how sometimes that information can be very threatening to us, and when our beliefs are threatening in some way, we can have what triggers the stress response, which gives us that psychological response, or that sort of stress response, which is often a psychological, not just a physical. So just looking at the fact that we're going to be looking at some of the different ways in which we can help to resolve that. We've looked at some of the different therapeutic techniques and how that feeds into the combined approach that we take with the Andrew Parr approach, and just some of the different ways in which we can enter into hypnosis, if you like, and some of the conditions finally today that we need to take a little bit more care over. So that's kind of a sum up of where we are to date. And as I said, tomorrow Wednesday, we will move on and look at just working through those assignment questions. So any questions that you might have about the assignments, do bring Wednesday. We will hopefully have a bit of time to do inductions, and we'll also look at the reflective journal and the personal learning journal and how they can be best used. Okay. So before we sort of go tonight, is there anything that anybody would like to ask before we move into Wednesday? No? Oh, actually, somebody made a request. I can't remember who it was earlier on, about getting round the members area, sort of a bit of navigation of that. So would that be helpful on Wednesday to look at that a little bit? Yeah, I've got a thumbs up from somebody there anyway. Yeah, another one. Okay, so we'll add that in on Wednesday as well. Okay. I can't believe it. I think we've actually finished dead on time. This is amazing. Right, okay. I shall let you all go now. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank
Bye. See
you.
later.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.